Himanshu, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Great to connect. Great to be on Asia Tech. Looking forward to this conversation and talk about Fanztar reaching your audience. Things have been really great, Ashu, on Fanstar's front. Exciting things going on.
Super. Super. Himanshu, I've been particularly excited about this conversation, right? I mean, I usually say this for a lot of my conversations, and my team continues to tell me that, this is becoming cliche, right? At the start of the conversation, you're excited about everything, right? No, but I think India's been a very, very interesting market, right? I'm particularly excited about this conversation of Fanstars, largely because, the way we've seen emergence of new asset classes in the last 2.5 years, right? And that's largely because the global liquidity event and condition that we saw has been absolutely spectacular, right? The good part about a lot of this is that this is not, people today who are investing in some of these assets know about these assets, right? There's a little more information which is there, right? The good part is founders like yourself, who are enabling a lot of these asset classes have actually, in a very, in a very solid way, actually gone out and communicated with their audience, right? And I think that is the reason of this excitement that is coming. People are, I think, buying into that thesis, which is spectacular, right? I think NFTs as a space, something that you're doing and you're solving for at Fanstars, right, has been, globally there's been a massive momentum around it, right? There's a lot of positive sentiment around it, and I think in a way, this was something which was, being talked about, right? How is it that creators can capitalize on, on this entire relationship and the credibility that they have with their fans, right? I think it was a moment and a matter of time before somebody institutionalized it. I think NFTs has come out, and certain solutions globally have come around and very beautifully, helping now creators capitalize and build this deeper engagement and relationship, and also
Absolutely.
in a way giving a possibility of monetization, right? Which has been very, very interesting in this process, right? You are enabling that in India, and like I said, right, excited to have you and excited to be doing this conversation. Before I do that, Himanshu, I'd love you to give us a quick round of background and we dive into talking more about Fanstars, right?
Amazing.
I am on the learning end. I'm on the learning end in this conversation. All questions that I give out will possibly be directed in a way that more and more people see this and they absorb it and understand it, to possibly be participating in the future. Right? So over to you, Himanshu. A quick round of introduction and we start the conversation.
Yes. So Ashu, before diving into the idea that Fanstar is, I think I'll just tell people about where I come from and then about the journey that and where we are going with Fanstar, right? So I'm a IIT Delhi graduate, graduated in 2015 along with my co-founder who was a batchmate of mine, right? So I've been in the last 6 to 7 years of my professional career, I've been working with a couple of startups in the high growth teams, right? Spent around 2 years building financial tech software for Delivery, which is the e-commerce logistics firm, right? And then eventually moved to a completely different role, like strategy, new ventures, then went on to head sales and marketing for a product that was completely made in India for the world, a medical device product. So, I mean, I have had my share of things that I've done in my career, which are totally non-related, but that actually gave me a sense of the world, right? As to what all can happen with tech, right? What are the possibilities? And I think in the last 3 to 4 years, right, Web3 and crypto as a space has really sort of grabbed everybody's attention, right? And I think there are certain bull and bear market phases that the market goes through, and you see a lot of fallouts from the audience, as in people who never come back to the market, right? So I think what I learned during this phase is that the best products get built in the bear phases, right? So if you talk about products like Ethereum and all the other alternative chains to Bitcoin, right? They sort of were born out of some sort of bear market, some sort of feeling that, you need to be more efficient in this regard and so on, right? So while all this was happening in the world, right? I happen to dabble a lot with a lot of these decentralized applications, right? And I sort of sensed a revolution that was sort of brewing on Discord servers and so on, right? Wherein people sitting in remote parts of the world contributing to a repository on GitHub and creating a product that is used by billions of people, right? So that was completely sort of new, and that the COVID basically 2020 sort of changed it for all of us, right? And 2021 is the year when me and my co-founder, towards the end of 2021, is when we decided, we need to jump full time into it, right? So I think that was the time we decided that we are going to give our full energy to Fanstar. So it was born out of that need, wherein we saw that in countries like India, you have this stardom sort of play out, right? Where you have a lot of gap between the star and the fan. I mean, that relationship does not necessarily have to be that way, right? If you can enable democratic access to celebrities or even the smaller creators, I think that is where we sort of started thinking, and we came across a problem that was so big in nature, which we could sort of talk to people and sort of quickly figure out, is the fact that these creators online, as the users on these content platforms are growing in India, right? They've now reached a proportion which is higher than a lot of countries combined, right?
Sure.
So you now have around 45 crore people in India that use social media platforms in some sort of way, right? Including the short video platforms. So we saw that, the content creators are also growing in number, and they're growing at a more faster pace than the growth in the overall internet users. Right. So we wanted to solve for this creator monetization problem, right?
Interesting.
Because I think that is where a lot of interest from investors, from fans will be in the next couple of years, right? And we were very excited to solve for it because it's a huge market, right?
Super.
And that is why, so we started with this idea wherein we are giving creators and access to their fan communities to sort of invest in creators themselves, right?
Super.
So that's what Fanztar is sort of all about.
Interesting. We're going to talk about the merits, right? But Himanshu, honestly, I come from a school of thought, right? And that possibly has something to do with when I possibly started my career, right? And that was more traditional. I think when you start looking at decentralized currencies, decentralized movements, right? I think these are fairly new in many ways. I continue to be on the other side, right? I continue to be a disbeliever for the longest time till I got into a very relevant conversation, right? And somebody managed to convince me that there is an alternate world which is coming together, right? And where you're going to need a certain currency, right? And I think that became a very strong justification of cryptos in general, right? But I mean that just seemed to be one of use cases, right? When I look at Fanztar today, when I look at it in this conversation, what is interesting is that there is a certain underlying, right? And that underlying continues to be that relationship which is out there, right? Content creators don't necessarily get or able to monetize what they create, right? Or for the fans to kind of leverage that association that they have, right? In a variety of ways. And I think that's essentially what you're solving, right? Now, this is something which just becomes so much more relevant in the larger scheme of things, right? Himanshu, moving on to, why don't you just break it down for us, right? In terms of what happens from a creator side, right? Because today the medium of creators, ideation and independence of going out and creating is there are many avenues that have come up, right? Monetization is something that was not there. That was the missing element, right? Why don't you tell us how is this? What's the construct of the product, right? How does this goes in and fits in? How does the creator goes on to monetize using Fanztar? Would love to understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially starting with the problem, right? What we see is that very small percentage of creators create a substantial amount of income to sustain a living on these platforms. Whereas you see a whole sea of creators out there who are trying to do it, right? So in order to sort of facilitate that, and in order to, so your monetization potential of a creator basically depends on the size of their audience and the influence they have on this audience, right? That's when the brands sort of come in and they say that we want a fair share of your time, right? To sort of tell people about the product, right? So I think what we want to do is, if it can enable a micro creator a tool wherein which they can sort of grow their audience, right? And grow their influence over them by giving them a certain share in the whole process, right? Now, if you look at the proposition from the creator's side, what the creator really needs is a way to retain their audience and grow their audience, and eventually be able to monetize them in a way that they want, right? So what the entire offering does is that every creator can issue fan cards. These are sort of utility NFTs, right? But our focus is basically on the fan card proposition, because NFT is just an underlying proposition to sort of enable this tradability, programmability, and so on. So they basically, the fan cards are basically an offering to the fans to basically come in and own a share of my future success, of future growth. Let's say my YouTube channel grows 10x to where it is right now, and I sort of choose to share 10% of my revenues with my fan community, right? Fan card holders. So that is built into the smart contract of the fan card, and that is something that these people can buy. Apart from this proposition, you also have a lot of perks inbuilt, right? The fans can get access to backstage experiences, right? Exclusive access to interactions, meet and greets, right? And you get a chance to feature in videos with these creators who appeal to a bigger audience, right? So I mean, if you look at the both sets of proposition, apart from monetary, it's also about getting that engagement, right? So that's how the fan card sort of works out.
Super. Now, Himanshu, two very clear challenges, right? I'm in the business of content. I understand content very well, right? Now, what has happened is that, with the kind of apps that we're seeing, right? And with camera phones and high resolution, improved infrastructure, right? And when I say infrastructure, that's largely, the tech and the network infrastructure, right? What has happened is that everybody is creating content, right? Now, a large part of that content is not necessarily relevant, right? There are just about a handful who qualify. Even if you look at, say, for example, the top 10 or 15 or 20 creators in the country are guys who started, or people who started, early 2014, 2015, right? And they've essentially gone on. It's taken them a certain amount of time to go and build that display, right? For a lot of content creators today, they might not see the kind of depth. That's number one, right? Number two, this entire process of creativity is not institutionalized, right? It's in a way very, very factor, right? So I might be consistent for say 10, 15, 20 days when I'm making the content, right? I might not be very consistent with creating that kind of content, right? Now, in that case, I'd love to understand, how do you think about, such creators going on and, wanting to do their NFTs and, and their fans buying into this, right? I mean, I just find certain nooks and crannies as far as this entire process is concerned, right? And like I said, everybody's a content creator. You're talking about 45 crore people who are, that's for 50 million, right? Who are content creators in the process. The fact of the matter is, I am a content creator myself. I might be following you. You're a content creator, right? Will I buy into your NFT? Who are we selling to, right? Where are we on that front? I'd love to understand.
Yeah. So I think what we intend to sort of do with these fan card offerings is that you sort of go out and support creators and content that you believe in, right? Okay. And that you already do in your present life, right? You spend certain time and attention on Instagram following a certain number of creators out there. Let's say you follow 5 creators, right? Because you believe in their content or you enjoy their content. Some part of this content bucket is obviously entertainment, right? Which may not be relevant to a certain set of people, but will be relevant to your core set of fans, right? And then there is education and beauty and so on, right? So what we really intend to do is that every creator can sort of appeal to their fan community, which will involve a lot of smaller content creators as well, right? Just as you mentioned, right? Everybody is an aspiring content creator in some sense of the word, right? For them, a chance to feature or a chance to sort of endorse yourself to a larger audience in the form of the larger creators audience can be a perk which sort of stands out for them, right? For a smaller creator to get access to an aspirational creator that they look up to, right? And sort of deeply engage and get access to such opportunities where they can sort of have a visibility to their larger audience. I think that can be a game changer. On the fans front, they can, or someone aspiring to be a content creator but not a content creator yet, can also look forward to these one-on-one sessions that we will be organizing as part of the reward program that we are building in, right? So Ashu, I think I'll need to come in here once with also the second part of that equation. The rewards part is sort of gamified in the sense that every fan card basically gives you a set of rule book, right? Just as you talked about, the consistency in content creation, the achievements on and off the platforms, right, is being tracked by our tool, right? And fan card holders are incentivized as and when the creator that they're supporting sort of does well in those fields. And that platform reward program is what drives engagement, gamification, and eventually those access to exclusive events and so on, right? So I think the entire proposition is more about gamification of entertainment, and then eventually driving some value out of fans to the creators and creating an experience which pays both of them as and when the creator grows, right?
Interesting. Now, Himanshu, the other thing that I want to understand, right, which is also a very critical challenge that I see, right, as right? Now, given what you're saying, I completely understand that, right? Now, this is not rocket science, right? That essentially means that when you are trying to bring up, the larger audience at par with, their ability to go out and create content, right? What that essentially means is that there's going to be a massive oversupply, right, as we go along, right? And now this is not oversupply which is going to take too much time. This is oversupply which is going to happen much faster. The point is that, at this given point in time, there are not a lot of people who are commercially bent, right? But as soon as, for example, say, Fanztar gets introduced, and there are like a couple of other players who are operating in the same space, right? They come into being. Eventually content creators will start to understand the possibility of monetization, right? My fear is that, as a lot of this improves, there's going to be a certain commoditization which is going to happen, right? In terms of your ability to upprice, right? At best, what you have is elasticity of 5-7%, right? From your pricing. What's your sense of that, right? That essentially means that I own a stock which is only going to do so much, right? So it largely becomes a function of X number of events that I do in a year, and not, say, limiting my number of events, but expansion in the pricing that I have, right? How do you see that?
So I think, Ashu, to begin with, what we are really focusing on in phase 1 is the quality of content creators and identification of breakthrough creators, sort of to solidify the value proposition for the fans, which will eventually take care of the upside that you can have to a certain proposition. And when sort of fans start realizing that such an asset class can bring about certain returns, right? And then that is when you see a lot of these content creators rush become to be a part of the platform. I think the way we differentiate ourselves and the way we want to sort of protect the turf in terms of margins and in terms of our ability to stand out is the fact that we are not going out and basically being a tool which is open for any creator to sort of come on board and do a certain offering to run away. We are a complete end-to-end program, right? Wherein we take care and we design the content calendar and the engagement calendar along with the creator. And also we have certain guarantees in the form of legal agreements, contracts, so as to ensure that the fans are not robbed of anything, right? And that is something that not a lot of platforms globally who are sort of operating in this space, but not exactly the approach that we are sort of taking, are doing, right? So we want to undo those mistakes that these guys have done, right, in whatever form or shape that they have done, and protect the fans, right? And that is where your premium or your price, your ability to upprice will come in, right? Whereas because people will feel more trusted by the sort of platform, right?
Interesting. Now, Himanshu, I've been asking some very difficult questions, right? Last one. In this conversation, right? I want to save some of the others for the next conversation, right? But one thing that is kind of building up, right? And I think this is something which is at least very, very visible in the urban audience, right? Is a sense of fatigue that is building up, right? Now, because there's a certain commercialization. Now, why do I ask you a question around commercialization? Is because the underlying of NFT continues to be the performance of the creator, right? Right? And that's essentially I'm buying an NFT as a believer, right? In many ways. Now, the fact, like I said, right, of the matter is that there is a certain fatigue which is building up, right? And today at least the urban audience has started to understand that some of this content that is getting created is essentially being done in partnership, right? Which essentially means there's a certain skew, right? The neutrality on content creation is going on, and that is basically the brands. So there are two things, right, that are happening. One is there is a sense of fatigue which is building up, right, and that is largely because the neutrality is gone. And the brands today want to experiment with a very different kind of model, right, which are conversion-based models, right? Now, if you look at traditional media industry, where a lot of this, we can draw a lot of parallel and learnings from, has continued to stay away from performance-driven marketing, right? Right, and I think that was true for content creator space as well, right? It was more branding, it was more impressions, it was more visibility, it was more ability to communicate, right? What's your sense of it, right? Fatigue and this trade, trust element which is kicking in, right? What's your sense of it? How do you see that? Do you see that other platforms are going to come in and this is going to continue to shift? Because, while the creator can very quickly shift, right, the audience will always take time to build up in that particular platform, right? And every course is going to have a different champion, possibly, right? Does that make your job interesting, or does it make it difficult for you, right? Or both at the same time? I'd like to understand.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the fatigue that you talked about, I think for the users also, right? They've been hearing about this buzzword NFTs for a long while now, and people have sort of related that NFTs with an artwork or with an image or a video being sold, right? So first of all, what we are doing is we are using NFTs just as a store of ownership
Right.
to a certain value proposition that the creator
Right.
brings in, and so on, right?
Sure.
That sort of creates a new paradigm in the user's mind, right? In the fan's mind, which is what we are going to be communicating to the user prior to our launch next month, right? And we are working very hard in order to be able to sort of stand out in the market. And as you rightly said, creators can though easily shift, but they will only shift when they see a proposition somewhere else, and that proposition is basically brought in by the fans, right? So any platform you look at is driven by network effects. So us being sort of an early adopter, early mover in the space, right, will give us, if we are able to execute our breakthrough artists well, right, in the first 3-4 months, then it gives us an unfair advantage in the sense that, all our fans are not going to shift to any other platform because of what we have achieved in the first with the first set of creators, right? And that is not as easy as it may sound, right? We're working very, very hard on the back end to sort of ensure that we pick the right creators and then give them the right tools and then bring in their audiences, because this is a trust relationship. And we sort of have to build on top of that, right? So that is how sort of we want to navigate the field. I think if that answers your question.
It does. To an extent, it does, right? But I think any question has multiple dimensions, right?
Yes.
And I think the hero of this conversation is you and not me, right, Himanshu? Himanshu, you've have some early believers, right? There are investors that you've had and some marquee ones, right? Who are champions in the space, right? Who've been looking at India as a market very, very closely. Why don't you tell us a little more about that, right? Who are some of these people who backed you this journey? What is it that they are, what's their belief system? I'd love to understand that.
So Ashu, this is the favorite part of the conversation. I think we've been blessed and we are really grateful to be backed by, like you said, marquee investors in the space. I think our lead investor is India Quotient. This is the VC fund that is basically considered as the holy social media giant, right? So they are the ones who identify social trends before anyone else, right? They were the earliest backers in ShareChat, which is now a $5 billion startup, right? Also earliest backers in companies like Sugar Cosmetics and Lending Card and so on, right? So we were very blessed to have them on board. And then we have a bunch of angel investors, very strategic angel investors who can sort of help us, who have a fairly good understanding of the space, right? To start off with, the entire founding team of ShareChat is one of the early investors, right? Ankush, Bhanu and Fareed, right? These are the stalwarts in social media space and creator economy. So blessed to have them. Their CFO is also who's one of the biggest names in finance right now, startup finance right now. Manohar Charan is also an investor, followed by Sarthak Mishra from SoftBank India's management team. Big guy, and so we're very sort of excited to have him and understand how do you scale up a platform, right? He brings in a lot of expertise in that regard. And then lastly, we have Tarseem Mittal from TM Talent Management, who's one of Bollywood music's biggest talent management companies, right? And he has ventures across verticals, like you talk about music labels, you talk about talent management and so on, right? So I think we've gotten the best in our bag, and we hope to sort of make the most out of it.
Super. Himanshu, towards the end of the conversation, all good things have to come to an end, and so does this, right? I don't honestly want this. I want this conversation to continue. There are many things that are to be discussed, right? But I think I'm going to save some of that for our next conversation. Himanshu, what are the next 2 years like, right? Now you're in the middle of, or not just you, I think the world is in the middle of, if not a crisis, right? I think a certain slowdown, right? And this is something that we've not seen. This is not something that we've experienced, right? On the inflationary side of it, there's a war going on, right? Liquidity crisis of sorts building up, right?
Yes.
People eating out of savings, right? Which is a huge negative. What we saw in the last 2.5 years of COVID was that people were not traveling and there was more disposable capital, which was essentially going into more and more assets, right? And that is the reason we saw the expansion of of returns and prices of assets and so on and so forth, right? Which just in the opposite in a very, very quick time frame, right? What's your sense of it? Cryptos is seeing a massive negative sort of a wave, right? So is the case with other asset classes across the board, barring, of course, bullion and a bunch of other things, right? What's your sense of it? How do you see this? And your next 2 years, how do you sort of visualize the markets playing out to you?
Yeah. So Ashu, there are actually a lot of aspects to this entire topic, right? Apart from the macro factors like the liquidity crisis and the war, which is sort of interrupted the flow of capital, right? But what I really see for India, certain bright spots for India, and especially for companies like us, is the fact that, China is now almost close to venture capital. People don't want to invest, right? And a lot of that capital is essentially flowing into India, right? Plus, of all the internet economies out there, India is sort of the only frontier which is growing at the pace at which it's growing, right? So what I think, a lot of that decline in capital is not going to affect India as much as it's going to affect other demographics. Apart from that, I think as and when what we have seen over the history of venture investing, whenever such a crisis happens, it impacts Series B and beyond more, because these are the rounds which have considerable capital requirements, right? So I think it's good for early stage investing for people like us who are looking for a pre-series A in the next couple of months, right? Because it kind of translates into a lot of early stage deals for VCs because they want to hedge their bets. And I think we are sort of on track with that. We are in talks with a lot of large venture capital funds who are very interested to invest in this space. And also, one last thing, Ashu, is the fact that the space that we are in, Web3, is one of the fastest growing. So, I mean, if you talk, we are in the best of the best situation right now in terms of company and how we are placed. Just that we want to capitalize on the execution, right? If we get it well, I think we are not very concerned about the liquidity crisis. Interesting.
Himanshu, I understand, as a founder, right? I think, and when you're doing a startup and when you're doing a Web3 or a technology startup, right? I think it's important to understand, how the venture capital money is going in, right? I think my question was more skewed towards, the entire consumption appetite, right? In the global economy. And I think that is something that I fear. And that's largely what that essentially is going to translate to lesser advertising budgets, which essentially means that, creators will have lesser value contracts or contracts in general, right? Companies are going to spend lesser. Or maybe more, right? Depending on the effectiveness of their ability to convert, right? But I think it's going to be for a select sort of an audience. But this is a trend, right? I think this is a trend, and I think we'll possibly, grow out of it, right? And I think such cycles hit businesses anyway. You really can't do anything about it, right? Himanshu, my last question, and it's possibly the most cliched of the lot, right? But I go on to do this, right? I enjoy doing this. Which is to register a founder's advice or suggestion that he wants to give out to the larger community. And that's largely because, everybody has a unique journey. You've been a professional, who's going to, take this very bold sort of a bet of building something, right? Any suggestion, advice in your journey that you would want to give out to, say a lot of friends, a lot of other maybe acquaintances, right? Who are sitting on the fence. What would that be? I'd love to register this as a party comment.
Yes. So I think this entire becoming a founder thing or starting a startup is not an easy journey, first of all. And if let's say you're not passionate about what you're doing, I think as cliche as it might sound, it does not work out really. So for me, I am doing it out of passion. And so I'm very happy whenever any challenges sort of come my way. And the other thing is that, I personally am very obsessed with the idea that you really have to make a dent in the universe. And if you are from that sort of mindset, I think you should really go ahead with it, because that itch of, you creating a massive impact will always be there in terms of your sort of outlook towards life. I think if you have that, then it's a no-brainer. You anyways have to go with it. Even if you fail, you will really come out as a better person. I think just don't do it if you're not passionate about it. Don't do it for the money, because you never really are going to create a product that people love if you're just doing it out of money. I think then you're better off doing a business rather than a venture, which can be backed by capital. Because in order for a product to reach the scale that we are talking about, I think you really have to love what you're doing, right?
Interesting.
So that's my two bits.
I was I was just recently listening to something, right? And there was a very a brilliant point that was made, right? While it is difficult, it's self-healing, right? And I think that's essentially what you were kind of alluding to, right?
Yes, exactly.
Process self-healing, right? Himanshu, it was a pleasure to have you with us. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about a lot of challenges. We did not talk about a lot of things, right? I think a lot of things continue to still be answered, right? But I'm sure we're going to have many, many more opportunities. You're just in the early phase of building Fanztar, right? I think, and it's a sweet beginning, right? You're building it at a very, very opportune time, right? And why do I say that is because the rules of the game are getting redefined, right? Influencer-based marketing was never something that existed in the way that it does today. Content creators never looked at that being a full-time play for them and being able to monetize what they're doing, right? Creativity, my sense is, at least the way I look at it, right? In any organized economy, in a connected economy, there are two places where you make money, right? One is there's extreme intelligence, and second is there's extreme creativity, right? Because and that becomes the defining and the differentiating factor, right? Kudos to you for all the good work that you've been doing, right? And this entire plan of incentivizing the great content creators that we have, right? And India is a dramatic country, right? We have content creators.
For sure.
I think this is important, right? Wish you all the very best, Himanshu. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.